want to welcome all of you to the Business and Leaders Luncheon. It's great to have you. Again, it's nice also to have a luncheon where it's free. It's free to the chamber, but those of you that are eating at home, I'm sure that you're appreciating your budget on your lunches. So today we are sponsored, as we always are, at the Business and Leaders Luncheons by some amazing sponsors, and I want to give them everything that they need right now in terms of cheers. Portland General Electric, we are very grateful. They're not only a great member of the chamber and a sponsor of this event, but they're a wonderful partner to have in our homes and our businesses. Columbia Bank is our presenting sponsor. Great family bank, a great bank for small business as well as large business. So I want to thank them as well. And if Robin, you're on the call, I want to give you a thumbs up because you're going through a lot over at your bank, and I appreciate you very much. And the Boeing Company. Boeing Company is a relatively new sponsor to our Business and Leaders Luncheons. They absolutely saw the value and have continued to see the value even in this COVID time. Our stakeholder sponsors, the Gresham-Barlow School District, they see Business and Leaders Luncheon as an extension to their partnership with the businesses, and we know that education and business partnerships are necessary and need to be strong. And finally, Metro East Community Media is our media sponsor. They are helping record this morning. We're recording it as well as them, and you'll be able to see that those calls again. This Zoom again on their cable. We'll let you know what those times are so that you can be recorded. So I unfortunately can't see because of my screen. I don't know if we have any elected officials or board members with us today. So I want to apologize ahead of time that I can't see that, and I'm sorry. So if there's any elected officials, this is my one time I will avoid you, please. And board members, please don't fire me for not introducing you today. So we have two topics on the agenda today. One is about bridges and one's about toddlers. They don't have anything to do with each other, really, but they both have an impact on our region. Our first speakers today will be sharing the work that they did and what's ahead of us with the Burnside Bridge. Our good friend and chamber member, Neil Jensen, participated in this very important committee, representing East County and our side of Portland. He did an amazing job, and I'm sure was well-spoken and spoke out for us. So I want to thank Neil publicly for doing that. So today we're going to hear from Cassie Davis, the Public Involvement and Communication Lead. And we're also going to hear from Mike Burton. And Mike, I have your title as Multnomah County Communication Director. How close am I?
I don't really direct anybody, but thanks, Lynn. That would be a promotion. I'm just kind of a communication coordinator at the county, but transportation, yeah.
All right. So Mike Burton, communication, not director, but in charge of transportation. So what did the committee accomplish, why, and when? It's up to you, Mike and Cassie, to share it all with us.
Well, thanks so much. And Cassie, are you going to be sharing your screen, or does the chamber share the presentation?
Yeah, I was going to share my screen, but I'm attempting to do so, and it's giving me a little restriction. So if you're able to give me access to doing that, Lynn?
No, I gotcha. Yeah, I gotcha. I'm just checking, double clicking here. It says you should be able to share it now.
Thanks, Aisha.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, we'd like to thank again Neil for attending. I think we've had 16 meetings of our community task force that Neil sits on. They have done a lot of work, obviously, and in June they recommended a preferred alternative, and that's why we wanted to talk to you today to kind of share what the recommended alternative is for a new Burnside Bridge, as well as how to manage traffic during the construction period, which is expected to last 4 to 5 years. We were last in front of the chamber, I think last fall, and shared with you what had happened up to that point. So it's kind of a big milestone that we're up to, and we have some visuals to share of what the new bridge could look like, and some background about why it was recommended. So imagine we're getting close to sharing that.
Yeah, it's limiting what I can show. So I'm just trying to work it out a little bit. So let me see if this
Yeah,
works.
it looks like it's starting to come up now.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. All right. Beautiful.
Okay, we'll go to slide 2. Thanks, Cassie. Cassie's going to drive. This slide just is a reminder that these large earthquakes that are part of the history of the Northwest, they happen regularly. On this slide, those blue lines at the bottom represent 9.0 earthquakes, and that's over the last 10,000 years. The last one was in the year 1700, so before Lewis and Clark got here. And as you can see, they regularly happen. Those orange lines are 8.0 earthquakes. These are really big earthquakes. Even though they happen out of the Pacific Ocean, we'll see a lot of damage here in the Willamette Valley. And we're not ready for it because the bridges were designed before this knowledge of earthquake risk was known here. Next slide, please. So 3 main goals of this project. The top one is the day of the big one, we want this bridge to be usable. So we don't want a bridge that takes a week or 2 to get it fixed. It's going to be built to a very high seismic standard. The second one is after that earthquake, if we just have one crossing of the Willamette River in the region, it will help us to recover from that economic disaster. And that's of interest, I think, to the Chamber and to everybody who works in our region. We don't want to be like New Orleans was after Hurricane Katrina. I think they lost about 1/3 of the population, and many of the people have never come back. So it could help us with our recovery. And then the bottom one there, long-term use. Well, if we're lucky and the earthquake doesn't happen for another 100 years, we still want to improve that bridge, which is 94 years old now, and make sure that we get more than another 100 years out of it and make it safer for all the different modes of traffic that use it. Next slide, please. So just as a reminder, some people might wonder, why is the Burnside Bridge the one we're focusing on? Well, it's the only Multnomah County bridge that is on a lifeline route. So we wanted to, spend this money and this time on a bridge that would be the most useful for the region to make it earthquake ready. That yellow line on the map there is Burnside Road, which goes all the way from Gresham in the east to Washington County in the west, goes over the West Hills where it turns into Barnes Road eventually. And the other lines on that map are the other lifeline routes, which you can imagine are the freeways, some of the major arterial roads like Sandy Boulevard. And this map actually shows those little red circles are seismically vulnerable structures like overpasses and underpasses that are not built to the seismic standard. And if you see the yellow line of Burnside, it's in pretty good shape. It doesn't have many problems, many red dots, and the Burnside Bridge is really the main flaw there. There's some little shorter tunnels up in the West Hills and a bridge that the city of Portland wants to fix so that that part up in the hills is more reliable. So that is why we chose Burnside. Next slide. So it's a long project, but every time we come and talk to you about it, we're getting a little closer to actually seeing some construction. Construction will be about 4 years from now. Previous to this planning phase that we're in now, we had a feasibility study that looked at every single idea we could come up with. And in this current phase, we looked in depth at 4 main options. And now we have a recommended one of those 4 that we're going to describe to you today. And it's a federal process. It's very rigorous. And it wouldn't be till late next year that we get approval from the federal government so that we could then start to design and build the bridge. We also want to choose which type of structure in the next year. And Neil's on the committee that will be working with us to help decide what type of structure it is. So that's slightly different. It's the preferred alternative is just where it is, how big it is, but then the other decision that's under type selection is what structure type. So next slide, please. So these are the 4 options we've studied in depth. The top one is the only one that would fix the old bridge. And you might think that would be the cheapest one, but after a lot of study, it turns out that it's the second most expensive of the 4. And I have a slide coming up that shows why it is so expensive to fix that old bridge. So the bottom 3 are all new movable Burnside bridges. When I say movable, they have a span in the middle that can open for ships. The second one there would be a new Burnside Bridge without a whole lot of structure up above. So it has relatively conventional size spans, meaning the distance between the columns that support the bridge under in the ground. The third one is the one that's actually been recommended, and we call it the long span because the spans are very long, and it means that there's fewer columns supporting the bridge. And it may look expensive, but it's actually the least expensive of the four. And I'll describe in an upcoming slide why that is. And then the bottom one was the most expensive, and it would have extended Cooch Street on the east side of the river out in a kind of more gentle curve, rejoining the bridge over the river. And the point of that one was to make the bridge a little friendlier for long vehicles like semi-trucks and the Portland streetcar. But this turned out to be the riskiest and most expensive, most impacts to nearby buildings. And we figured out a way to get the longer vehicles on the bridge with the current approach on the east side. Next slide, please. So this is an image of what a new long span bridge could look like. And you see there's those three arches across the river. And the spans that are really especially long are the two that are on the sides of the middle one. And they basically kind of vault over the unstable soil that's near the river. And then the type of lift span could either be a lift like this one, which is kind of like the Hawthorne or the Steel Bridge or the I-5 Columbia River crossing, or it could be a bascule bridge like the current Burnside is. And that's what we'll be deciding in the next year. And I think the next slide kind of shows about the advantages and why this one was recommended. So it does the best in an earthquake, which is the main purpose of the project. So that was important. And it does the best really because it avoids that bad soil near the river. Because it has less underground risky foundations, it's also the least expensive. So I didn't mean to say cheap, but it's the cheapest of the four at $825 million. Because it has less columns supporting the bridge underneath, it opens up more space for things like Saturday Market, which is the weekend market that's held underneath the bridge. On the east side, there's a skate park that's kind of famous that we could preserve if we did this option because the span would just kind of go above it. Up on top of the bridge, where you're probably more interested, there'd be more space for the traffic lanes, the bicycle lanes, the sidewalks. Because there's less columns in the river, there's less impacts to natural resources, so it'll be easier to permit environmentally. And then when it comes to, is there anything that people don't like about this or that they have questions about? It's really the fact that it's going to be a taller bridge. There's going to be more structure up above the deck where there currently is very little structure. And that's going to change the views of downtown and of the bridge itself. So people want to make sure that we don't make an ugly bridge. And that's something we'll be thinking about a lot as we choose which type of structure. Next slide, please. So if you just remember one slide today, this is a good one to try to focus on because it really explains why they recommended this long span. So what's shown on this slide are the bad soils that I've been talking about, the soils that are expected to kind of turn to jello and really slide into the river, basically, in a big earthquake. And on the east side of the river, it's quite a wide band of soil. There's a curve in the river here that's been dumping a little bit of the sediment as the water goes around that curve for thousands of years. So it's all the way to 2nd Avenue. Whereas on the west side, on the inside of that curve, it's a much narrower strip in Waterfront Park there, just about maybe 40 or 50 feet wide. So in the top drawing there, you see those little orange circles. Well, those represent the columns that are underground supporting the spans. So if you see that there's just one set of columns that's in that unstable soil, it's a pretty easy place to do construction, and it minimizes the number of columns that is in that bad soil. Moving down to the other images below, you see lots of these orange dots representing the columns that would have to be built in that bad soil. And then if you think about where that is, it's in between the lanes of I-5 and I-84 ramps. near the, some of them are even in the river between the freeway and the East Bank Esplanade. Very challenging area to build in. And then at the bottom is the, this helps explain, well, why is fixing the old bridge so expensive? It's because it has tons of these very short spans, and each one of those we'd have to go underground, practically down to bedrock, to make sure the bridge is still standing after a big earthquake. So this is risky, expensive work, and the less you do of it, the cheaper the project is and the more stable the bridge will be. Next slide, please. And Cassie, is this where I transition to you?
Yeah.
Okay, you can take over here.
Okay. So there were two recommendations that the community task force made going up to this, all the work that Neil participated in. And so Mike just shared with you the recommended preferred alternative for what we'll do for a long-term solution to make sure the bridge is still standing after that major earthquake. The other recommendation was about what we would do during construction in terms of traffic. Do we fully close the bridge and detour to other bridges? And with that, you kind of do the rip the Band-Aid off effect, where you just, shut it down, get it done, shorter construction duration, but there is a bit more traffic and limited access in that area. Or we also looked at building a temporary bridge. Building a temporary bridge would still have to be movable to allow for river navigation to pass through, and it would be temporary. So you're building a full structure here just to maintain some level of capacity during construction. This would not be the full width of the Burnside Bridge. It would be about one lane in each direction, and then bike and pedestrian facilities on each side. So it would allow for that connection to be maintained, but at a lower capacity. And in order to build this, as you might imagine, it's pretty costly. It would add up to $90 million to the project, and it would add a 1.5 to 2 years to the overall construction duration. So with that, the recommendation from the Community Task Force was to just go ahead, preserve the $90 million, don't add that extra cost, keep the construction duration as quick as possible. So don't add that extra 1.5 to 2 years, and limit the amount of impacts to natural resources. You saw the number of columns that would have to be built up in the water and surrounding area just to 6 years later be, uprooted and pulled out. So the recommendation for traffic during construction is to just go ahead and close the bridge and detour to other routes. Something to note there is that when we did the traffic study, we found that it would offer 2 to 4 minutes of travel time safety for vehicles compared to a temporary bridge. So that was kind of, didn't seem like a strong enough trade-off to the Community Task Force. So now, with this recommendation from the Community Task Force, we're going out and asking for input from the public. So we have an online open house that is live right now. If you went to burnsidebridge.participate.online, you can access that through August 31st. You can also go to the project website, which is burnsidebridge.org, and you can find links to there pretty easily. But now is really that opportunity time to go online and weigh in. We're also doing briefings like this one at various different community organizations to share information, to get input. We're also have some virtual tours and animations online that help people understand this a little easier. And then we also work with our community engagement liaisons program to make sure that our engagement is broad and diverse. And that is with, there's 8 different community groups that they work with. 6 of them are non-English speaking. And so they go out and they really are the leaders and liaisons in their community to help bring those voices to the project. So if you haven't already, we do encourage you to go online and to share this link. So if you don't have it already, I'm happy to follow up with it after the meeting and share through your affiliates, your community members, and family and friends. And then after this big August outreach period, we will take all the input that we received back to Neil and the community task force and ask them to listen and consider the input that the community offered, and will have an opportunity to either confirm their recommendation or modify it before it goes to the policy group, who will then look to approve the recommendation. And then, as Mike talked about early on, there's going to be kind of a simultaneous process happening with the environmental review phase, which is to then kick off this, what we call type selection phase, which will look at kind of what that structure will look like in terms of the long spans, the movable piece of it. So just a real quick flash, there's this image here that I have that just sort of gives you a sense for there's still a lot more to come and decisions to be made about what that structure will ultimately look like. And in October of this year, we'll kick off that work with Neil and the Community Task Force, and that effort will go through the spring of next year, and then we'll have that type selection identified, and that will be incorporated into this bigger draft environmental impact statement document. And that will conclude the environmental review phase at the end of 2021, ultimately. So I'll stop right there and give us a moment to kind of soak all that in and open the room up for questions for Megan.
Yeah, one of the things I meant to say at the beginning is that anybody that's on the Zoom today had any questions, to put it in the Q&A, and Asha will forward those questions on to you. That's a little bit easier than trying to find who's raising their hand, etc. So if there are any questions, if you could put them in the Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen, that would be helpful. While we're waiting for them, I might have missed it. Is this project anyway funded by the upcoming Metro transportation tax? Or is it money that Mike's got hidden under his mattress? Or where's the funding eventually coming from to help us keep both sides of the river connected?
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. Yes. Metro has a transportation bond measure coming on the November ballot. If that measure passes, we'd get $150 million to construct this project. So it's a really big chunk of money. I think it'd be about 25% or so of our construction budget. We have a county vehicle fee that's paying for the rest of another 25% of construction, and also our current funding. And then the other 50% of the construction budget we would want to get from the state and federal governments. And they tend to tell us, if you can get through these early phases with your own money, then you can come to Uncle Sam and try to get some to get across the finish line with construction. So that's what our focus is.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. Now, you wouldn't necessarily need the money right away because you're still in the research and environmental phase. So the funds wouldn't be necessary for 2-3 years. What's that kind of timing like?
Yeah, that's actually a good thing for us because we're funded with our vehicle fee. We can keep going for the next, I think it is about 4 years.
Oh, okay.
And so if the Metro measure were to pass, that's another source that we lock in, and every bit that we get, it makes it easier to get the next bit. So we're pretty confident. We had pretty good luck with the Selwood Bridge project and finding money from the state and federal governments to match our local money. So that's our plan with this project too. And Representative DeFazio is currently the chair of the House Transportation Committee, and so we're keeping him informed of our progress. So we're hopeful, and I think it's pretty good consensus too. We've had 2,000 people take this survey that Cassie was telling you about, and I think we have about 84% consensus with what Neil's committee recommended. So every time you see consensus, it makes it more likely you're going to keep moving forward.
So it looks like, Asha, that we've got a Q&A question. Can you share that with us?
Correct. It's from Neil Jensen, and he would like to know, how deep do the piers in the Jello soil have to be set?
Good question. I think it's 100+ feet, maybe
Oh
between.
my gosh.
Yeah.
That's a football field. Oh no, 100. Yeah, wow.
Well, no, not 100 yards, 100. So like a third of a football field.
100 feet.
Yeah, 100 feet to 150. So there's, I think, a layer that's called the Troutdale layer. That's, I think, the harder layer. And they work to get down to that, which is, it's like bedrock, basically. So, and that's expensive. I remember the engineers I've worked with on a couple of these new bridge projects tell me that, the risk is what's underground. Like when you see the work up above ground, that's usually much less risky. It's like going underground is where the expensive surprises are. Like an example would be just where, they do boring to tell them what the sample rock is, but just a couple feet from that could be something that's even deeper where, and that makes more cost.
Yeah, you never know what's underground. Owning a landscape company, I can assure you of that. Everything looks fine on top, but that next layer down is hard. So I have one last question, and then I see our next speaker is already on the call. Cassie and Mike, are you going to officially change the name of this Burnside Committee to Neil's Committee? You've referred to it twice already as Neil's Committee, and I need to know how to handle him when you do or don't make that change.
Oh, boy. Well, he's just going to get a star for good attendance, no matter what. I'm not sure about naming the committee for him, but
okay. I just wanted to double check. I want to thank both of you. That was a tremendous presentation. I'm going to share it with other community members. The Rotary Club may call you because it sounds like you still there still is a lot of opportunity to weigh in, and we really need, even though we're out 180, 190 blocks from downtown Portland, we still care about what happens and how to get to the other side of our city area. So thank you both so much. It was a great presentation, and we'll be in touch.
Okay, thanks for sharing that with your members.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
All right. I am so grateful that we have our next presenter already on the phone, already on the Zoom call. And I've never personally met the commissioner, so this is an honor to have you with us today. We have, talking about toddlers, the bridges to the toddlers part of our BLT today. We have Commissioner Jessica Vega Peterson with us. She is the Multnomah County Board of Commissioner representing District 3. And before being elected to Multnomah County Board, she served in the state legislature in Oregon, where she was the first Latina elected to the House. What an honor that must have been. She has a transportation and energy and environment background. She also is a graduate, a technology professional graduate from Loyola, I must be tired, University in Chicago. So our second speaker today is going to share with us one of her passions. And her passion is preschool education. And you can tell by the hours of work that she's done just how important she feels this topic is. Commissioner, I want you to have the platform now to tell us about the work that you've done, what your proposal is, if it'll be on the ballot, and of course, why you think it's really important that 3- and 4-year-olds go to school. So, Commissioner, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Lynn. It is really great. I can't believe you and I haven't met, honestly, but it's really good to see you here today, and to be here and to have a chance to talk to the chamber about this work that's been going on for years, and that we have a chance to really get behind this fall. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. So let me get that started. And this is always, I feel like it's a little bit like always rolling the dice. With this goes. So let's go ahead and share that. Is everybody able to see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and so I'll go through here. So so today I wanted to just appreciate the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about Preschool for All, and give you a little bit of the history and what actually it's about, but also why it's so important that we make this investment and we provide this opportunity for kids in Multnomah County this fall. So there we go. Okay. So, a lot of times there may be some of you who are here today who are, have either, sent your own kids to preschool, or, you might be involved as a business, or, community support for preschools in Gresham. But preschool, especially quality, joyful preschool experiences, have such impact on both children and their families, but also our overall community. We really know that a quality preschool education creates access to opportunity for every child. One of the biggest things that for me has hit home is really the difference that teachers can see in kindergarten between the kids who have had a preschool experience before and those who haven't, and the way that the kids who haven't are behind their peers. They don't necessarily get the social, situation that they're in, and it takes a while for them to catch up. And in some cases, though, in far too many cases, they never catch up, and we see that disparity trickle through to elementary, high school, and even graduation rates and beyond. So really, this is about creating access to opportunity for every child in our community. It impacts child development. We're not just talking about academics here, but we're really talking about social and emotional development as well, the physical development that's really vital for children to have exposure to, and to really to get that enriching experience. And as I mentioned before, these are skills that children need throughout their lives. So it's about the social interactions. It's about getting a base for education. And it's something that benefits not just the children, but also their parents. So research has shown that parents who are engaged in their child's preschool experience, who have a positive experience with that, go on to be more actively engaged in their child's entire educational career. So that's something that's very important. I have a slide next that really shows some research around this next one, but we know that quality childhood experience with preschool yields higher lifetime earnings and better health outcomes. So again, it's not just something that is making a difference for these children in the moment in their early education years, but it's something that benefits them and in turn benefits our community throughout a lifetime. And as a community, as we're thinking about what are the smartest ways that we can be making investments that are going to pay dividends for all of us, but are also going to be really good values. This is something that preschool is something that absolutely does this. We know that for preschool, it is something that that returns for every dollar invested $7 to $10 in a return on investment. This is the slide that I was talking about earlier that really talks about what the difference are, especially generationally for children. So, this is based on the Perry Preschool program, which has been, it was a study that started 40 years ago. And they looked at how this quality childhood, early childhood preschool experience really impacted the children that went through it. And we see benefits with, not having interaction with our criminal justice system, with higher overall wages and earnings, higher graduation rates from high school, and even in the shorter term, like making sure that children are being set up for success in school by having benefits that are in their elementary school and middle school years with homework and basic achievement, and even impacting their IQ. So. And one of the most interesting things in this Perry Preschool study of 40 is that they found these impacts were not just on the kids who had gone through that preschool program, but also it had a generational effect on their children. So their children were still receiving the benefits of this really quality education experience that they received early on. Oops, and I think there we go. So this is one, what I talked about earlier a little bit on the previous slide about the return on investment. This is something that I see every day as a county commissioner, and the programs, that we do. We really do a lot of these social net, safety net services and social services that people need, whether it's through, help for seniors, if it's housing and rental assistance, whether it's addiction and mental health services, public safety, right? Like we really provide a lot of these crucial safety net services. But if you look at how we're spending our dollars and how we're making the investments, we're really putting dollars into these things because we're trying to address a crisis. We're trying to respond to, to something that isn't a positive situation, and we're trying to help fix things. One of the reasons why I'm so supportive of investments in preschool is that it just makes sense for us as a community to making these investments upstream so that we can have these impacts earlier on at a lower cost that really pay dividends throughout a person's life and throughout the community. And this really shows that the earlier you can make those kinds of investments, the bigger dividends it pays off in terms of the dollars that you're putting in there. So when we talk about preschool, though, here in Multnomah County, we know that there are challenges. We know that that we don't have an ideal situation by far. In Oregon, we actually have the 4th most expensive childcare in the United States. A big part of that is that we just don't have enough childcare centers. We have childcare deserts all across our state, including in Multnomah County. And that really makes the prices out of reach for a lot of families, or a huge burden. And that's on top of, as I'm sure you know, the burden that housing costs already are. So when you combine those two, a lot of families can't afford it. And so they really have to make a decision to maybe give the preschool experience that's the least expensive and possibly not the best for their children. A part of that is only 15% of preschool children have publicly funded education. And that really comes from the existing federal Head Start programs that we have here in Oregon, the investments that the state has made in Preschool Promise or Oregon Pre-K, right? Those are some investments, but even with that work, we're only reaching 15% of preschool children having access to those kinds of programs. On top of that, it's not a field that is a career investment where you can really have a living wage and to make ends meet. Preschool teachers right now make half of the median kindergarten teacher salary. So, a preschool teacher potentially is making $14, $15, $16 an hour. Some child care and preschool centers that really try to focus on giving people additional dollars, that I've heard that goes up to $18 an hour, especially with some kind of hazard pay that people might be having during COVID, but not enough for somebody to really live on and have a career in. And that's what we're seeing when we talk to community colleges. It's hard for them to encourage people to go into early childhood because it's not something that they can have, that they can make a living at. And so that's a big problem as we look at what we need to fix about the system. That's a huge piece of it, is making sure that we have teachers coming into the field and are staying in the field. In addition to the shortage of teachers, we also have limited facilities. So we have childcare centers, we have some preschools at schools. We really need to continue to make investments to have more locations, to have more options for families as they're looking at preschools. And so we knew that was a piece of what we had to address as well. So the work that we've done in creating Preschool for All really started years ago. I would say 8 years ago. There was work that was done by United Way and social venture partners with community organizations to really establish priority populations. Who are the children in our community, in our county, that currently don't have access to quality education? What are the barriers that they're facing? And what can we do about that? And so that really established the priority populations of children that needed access the most. At the same time, there was work happening at the state level, and this happened to be when I was in the legislature, setting up early learning hubs around the state. And so Early Learning Multnomah was set up, and they really worked very closely with parents to create a vision for preschool in Multnomah County. This is something that work that they've done that's been incredibly powerful, and having parents be at the table to be decision makers, to help really share their experiences with preschool and create a vision of what kind of preschool would work for them. A little, over 2 years ago, then I was connected with this work that had been happening and building on the work that I'd done in preschool at the state level to convene the Preschool for All Task Force. So the Preschool for All Task Force was made up of about 25 people at the task force table, but we had 4 separate subcommittees that were made up of really subject matter experts to delve into the preschool policy, into the workforce needs, finance and administration, and infrastructure. So all told, we had over about 100 individuals and 30 different organizations that were really a part of this Preschool for All Task Force. We released a report last summer, in the summer of 19, after 10 months of meetings that had a vision for what Preschool for All could look like. We have had a lot of support and endorsement of that policy framework, and now we've taken it to my board to refer it to the ballot, which happened on August 6th. So this Preschool for All is something that will be on the ballot in November. The work that we did really started with a vision of, what if every child had access to a preschool that's right for them and every family could afford it? That was really how we started the Preschool for All work, based on the visioning that had been done by parents. And the people who were around the table, it was early learning experts, it was school districts, it was community colleges and higher education. We had healthcare, we had business, we had housing, we had philanthropy, we had community-based organizations, right? So I wanted to set a broad table so that as we were building out this vision, we were really going to hear from a whole cross-section of people in our community about what this could look like, and really be inclusive as we were developing this. So what we came up with is really a framework, and I'm happy to share after this meeting the framework that we've developed. It's actually about a 40-page document that goes into all the the nuts and bolts of what this looks like and how it would work. So if you're interested, you can definitely have access to that. But the high-level overview that I can give you now is that this is a program that would be free and voluntary for all 3- and 4-year-olds in Multnomah County. As I've talked about before, it prioritizes the most vulnerable children with the least access to kindergarten today. So that includes children from low-income families, children of color, so brown, Black, Indigenous children, all children of color, children with developmental delays and disabilities. They have special challenges accessing preschools that are right for them. Children who are speaking languages other than English at the home, children of incarcerated parents experiencing homelessness, military, children with family members in the military. All of these are children that we want to make sure not just have access, but that we're also really integral to how we were building this program and what were some of the policies we put in place to support these populations. And we also wanted to make sure that families had the choice of a preschool that was right for them. So we really said that we are going to have multiple length of day and length of year options, which means some families might need a half day, some families might want a school day length, some might need full day to support their working schedule, right? We want to support all of that, as well as length of year. For some families, a school year might work for them. Others may want year-round and need year-round care. So we wanted to be supportive of those options. In the same way, we know that there are a lot of different models of providing preschool today, and we wanted to be inclusive of those different models, but assuring that the developmental standards, the state learning standards were going to be, would be part of all of these different models if a provider wanted to be part of the Preschool for All program. So mixed delivery models could look like a small center-based preschool environment. It could be preschool that's provided as part of a larger childcare business. It could be a school that wants to build out their preschool structure. It could be a multi-generational, culturally specific preschool program that incorporates parents into the learning. So these are all different methods that we have currently in Multnomah County. We don't want to do anything that suppresses or limits the growth of that. We want to really uplift and expand what we have now that's working well, and to help bring along providers to grow the Preschool for All model in a way that, like I said, really makes a difference in the children's lives. I talked earlier about the challenges that the workforce currently has with what the wages are. So we want to make sure that we have living wages for the classroom teachers and their assistants. Anyone who's providing the education for the kids really needs to make sure that that they can stay in this field. And we also want to provide the workforce development, the coaching, the support that workforce would need to be successful in being a part of the Preschool for All program. So that is built into the budget that we built for this program. We also want to make sure that we are supporting the overall childcare system. One of the things we found as we looked at other jurisdictions who have implemented similar things for preschool is that if they had focused really just on the 3 and 4-year-olds, they would lose childcare for options for 0 to 3. So that's something that we thought about and considered as we were building this program. We wanted to do no harm to the 0 to 3. So again, in our budgeting for this, we really put money aside to help keep whole providers that were already providing the 0 to 3 care, so that we weren't going to be giving up slots of really needed 0 to 3 care for the 3 and 4-year-old slots. And we want to make sure that there's community-based oversight and accountability. So this Preschool for All would have an advisory board of about 12 to 15 people that would be appointed to help have oversight on this, as well as having a third-party evaluation of the program to make sure that it's meeting the goals and it's being fiscally responsible. So, like I said, those are the high-level views. The framework document that we have really goes into the details of these in a lot deeper scope. I know something that's interesting, because we are talking about something that's going to be on the ballot, is how do we pay for this? So we have a revenue mechanism that's really a tiered marginal income tax. So we tried to, how we approach this is that we built the program, we did what does this need to be successful for the children in Multnomah County? How much is that going to cost? And then we fit the revenue mechanism to raise the money that we needed. So we're looking at a 1.5% marginal income tax rate on incomes between $200,000 and $400,000 for household filers, or $125,000 to $250,000 for single filers. There would be an additional 1.5% on taxable income over $400,000 for joint filers or household filers, and above $250,000 for single filers. So again, that's all marginal income tax rate. But that gets us to getting really this program started and really addressing the needs of the priority populations that I mentioned earlier. What we also had in there, because there was actually a lot of interest in my board of making sure that we were going to be able to get to universal access for all children in Multnomah County in one go. There's an automatic 0.8% increase in 2026, but this is something that rate will be determined by a committee that will be formed to advise the board on really what is the correct rate that would be needed to get to universality. So obviously, if less revenue is needed to achieve universality, it wouldn't be an increase of 0.8%. The 0.8% model that we put in there really came about of assuming that there was going to be no additional investments at the state or federal level for slots for preschool. I'm going to go to the next slide, because that really kind of shows what we were making assumptions on in terms of enrollment and how we would grow this program. So the lighter blue at the very bottom of this is the currently publicly funded slots, so state and federal slots. Again, we're building in a worst case scenario that there would be no additional investment. I've talked to the state, I've talked to the governor. There's an intention to continue to grow the commitment that the state has made for preschool slots, which is fantastic. And so, again, it's kind of modeling for worst case scenario, but we will be able to in 2026 really take a look at what's needed to get to universality. There's also, options at the federal level. It'll be interesting to see over the next several years what happens in terms of investments in childcare and early education as well. There's always been talk about potentially making much bigger federal investments, and that's something that we might see happen in the next several years too. This is what it looks like from the budget and revenue perspective. So really looking at, what the additional dollars, how they will be spent, how will we be be able to grow the system, and then including that bump of the in 2026. So we're estimating the first year, we're going to get about $133 million from the initial tax rate to start the program up, and we will be able to get that going and have children actually start entering the system in fall of 2022. So this would go into effect if it passes in January of 2021. There would be time to build up the program, to get providers on board, to help with the professional development and supports that would be needed. And then we would be having the kids on carpets in fall of 2022. So as we look forward to what this really looks like, I have to say there's a lot of community support for investment in preschool. There was a separate, organization and coalition that was really looking at universal preschool as well. And they were able to get over 25,000 signatures over the summer for universal preschool. So there's a lot of support. We ourselves have done polling for this. We did voters, we did polling at the end of June, beginning of July, so post-COVID, and still saw really strong support. About 7 in 10 voters support the Preschool for All measure. So we're really, excited about the excitement that we're seeing in the community for this. And I think that's shown in our coalition of folks who have been working on this, from day one with the Preschool for All task force, but have come out and supported and endorsed, this concept and this path forward for our kids. And so this is a slide that shows a lot of this people and organizations that are supporting Preschool for All. Really proud of the really diverse coalition that has come together to support this work, to know that it's important and that it's building a program and building this in the right way for our children. I did want to share, since you guys were a business organization, something that I had shared when presenting to the Portland Business Alliance, which is really, as we were doing this work of looking at other jurisdictions, other places in the country where they have made investment in preschool, there have been really strong partnerships between business and the growth of preschool and early education. So we had partnerships from business in Seattle where they have made a similar type of investment, where they started a little smaller and then grew to a bigger preschool program with the businesses there. Denver, same way. Denver was a very early adopter of preschool. And that really was driven, I would say, a lot by their business community. They took a big lead in that, as well as having some really strong advocates in that work for early education that helps motivate folks. And Cincinnati, same thing. Cincinnati had something that was supported by business to get preschool there as well. So that is the presentation that I have for you today. I am happy to answer questions for you. I'm sure you've got a lot, but just really appreciate this opportunity to share about something that I've been working on for years, that has so much community support and really can be a huge game changer for children here in Multnomah County, and really the opportunities that we're providing systemically for all these kids.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I can understand your passion about the issue really comes across, even virtually, even on a flat screen. I love your passion and all the statistics that you gave us. That was amazing. Asha, I think there's some questions that we could pass forward and have the Commissioner answer.
Yeah, so this is from Jeff Kenaway. Make sure I'm off mute. Jeff Kenaway, he says, how do you gather information on preschoolers, and what effect will homeschooling have on this program and the results?
So how do we, there's a lot of work that's, I'm not quite sure how to answer the first part of the question. There's some data, in terms of population, we worked with Portland State University and Eco Northwest to get demographic information about the number of preschoolers. That could be one answer to the question. The other thing is, one of the components of the program is really, we want to make sure that we're doing programmatic evaluation to show the efficacy and the enrichment that's happening with the program, but we're not doing individual testing of 3 and 4-year-olds to show this program. That was something that's one of our policies that came out in the task force. So I think that's it. And then, as I said at the beginning, this is a voluntary program for 3 and 4-year-olds in Multnomah County. So families can choose to participate in it or not. Providers can choose to participate in it and not. What we're really trying to do is make sure that we're providing the opportunity for all children in Multnomah County. Working with, Eco Northwest in terms of the what our estimate was for what the maximum uptake of this would be. We're looking at probably like 90% of the 4-year-olds and about 80% of 3-year-olds, and that kind of gave us the numbers that we worked with in terms of scoping out what this would look like.
The second question is from Erin Beggs, and she says, is this program intended to build new facilities or is it subsidizing existing facilities? If it is subsidizing, how does a preschool qualify?
Yeah, so that is a really great question. And I think the answer is it's a bit of both. So we know that there are providers out there that are already providing kind of that joyful, quality, culturally uplifting experience, right, that are out there. We want to bring those into the program and to help expand their capacity to serve more children, right? We also know that there's a different subset of providers that are providing care, but probably need a little help with their professional development or their curriculum or things like that. So we would provide support for that too. How this would work is that the providers themselves would have subsidized slots. So similar to like Head Start, like subsidized slots that would be preschool for all slots, so to expand their capacity to serve families. And I think, integral to this success is actually not just subsidizing spots, but really expanding capacity, because we know we just don't have enough providers right now.
So should we have another question?
No, those are the two that came up so far.
I have one right now. This is hypothetical, but I kind of want to get an understanding in my head of how it would actually work. I don't dispute the fact that it's necessary and the results are amazing. But let's say I own a daycare that I also do preschool, and my parents are happy with it. And I want to take advantage of the new program that Multnomah County has. So I have a certain business structure already. I pay my employees based on whatever I choose, however I need to pay my employees to make sure they come to work. So do my employees that currently do my preschool have to have different criteria to do your preschool? And that's one question. And then do I need to pay them at a different rate than I previously did? And if they do the daycare in the morning and I'm a half-day preschool, do I pay them a different rate in the afternoon? I mean, I can see from a business perspective a lot of what about this and what about this and what about that? And you're told us at a 30,000 foot level, the program, and I immediately think of how do we get it done? That's my personality. So, Commissioner, can you kind of give me an idea of what that might look like?
Yeah, those are all fantastic questions. And this is something, that is also one of the reasons why we have an 18-month buildup, right, until kids actually start, because we want to build it the right way. And we want to be supportive of current providers that are doing this. So there are requirements in terms of wages that we would want to see to be a part of the Preschool for All program. So that's kindergarten salary classroom teacher salary on par with a kindergarten teacher's salary, and then classroom assistants would be about $20. It's based on the minimum wage, but we have built those calculations into the reimbursement rates that we would give to providers for each slot, right? And so we actually, for instance, a school system, which we want to be, we want to also grow preschool at schools too, but their amount that they would get for a preschool slot would be smaller than what we would provide to a smaller provider, because it's going to cost more for that smaller provider to have a slot there. And we also know, as I mentioned before, we also know that there has been negative effects on the 0 to 3 childcare population, where, you know, providers were like, well, I'm not going to do this anymore because it's more lucrative and I can pay my, you know, my workers more if I just do 3 and 4-year-olds. So we also have budgeted out ways for providers who are providing, let's say, like 0 to 5 care, additional support so that they can help not have disparities or, you know, huge disparities between the wages they're paying their different workers. This was a part of all the discussions, I think, that had started in the Preschool for All Task Force days with the workforce and program policy work groups, and have continued on. So even after we put the report out, there was a technical advisory committee that's still meeting, that's advising Department of County Human Services on what this should look like as it's implemented. I would say that if you know providers, if there are providers in the Gresham area that have questions about how this would work, please put them in contact with me in my office, because we want to hear from providers. There's been a lot of outreach that's done already, but we want to continue to have those conversations to make sure that this is going to work right. It's a really exciting opportunity as we look at this. This would be one of the most significant investments to create a really comprehensive and quality preschool system in the country, and we want to do it right. So we want to have those conversations.
Commissioner, I agree, and I hope that some of our businesses will take advantage of that request that you just made. Right now, because the restrictions on daycare and preschool are so strong and hard for our businesses, I'm not sure now's the time to be asking them to look at something new and different, because they're it's really difficult. It's difficult for parents to find a good daycare right now because of the restrictions on the daycare have limited them so much. So it's a supply and demand question right now. But soon, I'm keeping my fingers crossed, soon we'll be able to open those discussions and really have some freedom in conversation. I think, Asha, you might have gotten another question that popped up on my screen. What's that?
I did. Jeff Kenway asked if the tax is based on gross income or net taxable income.
It's on taxable income.
Okay.
And it's a marginal rate. So it's only the income made above the rate at which we have the thresholds. And Lynn, just to respond to I think that's absolutely right. What we've seen with COVID and the impacts on the childcare system has just been awful.
Yeah.
My office has been involved in trying to help get resources for childcare providers in our county. At one point we only had like 250 providers open across the entire state. Like it was, and that's a struggle. And it's been a struggle for parents who are trying to figure out how this is going to work, how they're going to be able to work when they don't have access to childcare. I think that's another reason, though, why, as we're looking at these additional supports that we can do for providers, that we want to really look at growing the system, but especially in the earlier years, as we're beginning to grow the system, to try to be as supportive as possible to the existing providers, so that we can get the ecosystem healthy again for childcare providers.
Yeah. I was more just expressing the fact that the timing might be wrong to try to involve some of them.
Oh.
It's like right after you get a root canal, asking me after my root canal if I like my dentist. The timing might be wrong on that, but that doesn't necessarily mean I don't like my dentist.
Yeah.
It's just the wrong time to ask me that question.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that if the ballot measure passes, that you guys are going to go just to as much strong effort as you have ahead of time in the implementation time, based on your passion. So I need to know, from a logistical standpoint, because I'm kind of a political geek sometimes, are both ballot measures going to be on the ballot in November, or is there? I've heard that they were, but then I heard that there was some negotiation that might go. What will we be voting on? 2 things, or 1, or what?
That's that's what we're trying to figure out right now. I think both Preschool for All and the Coalition of Universal Preschool Now has made an agreement to only have one. Our desire is to only have one be on the ballot, so we can have the strongest support possible for preschool this fall. And the way that we want to do that is by having Preschool for All go forward, which the board referred, and then having theirs brought into our code, but then really suspended so that we can focus on the one.
Okay.
We're working to see, I mean, that's ultimately a decision of my board. And so we're having those discussions right now of what that, if that's a path that we can take. I think overall it's really important that we have, a positive campaign for universal preschool that really represents what people are excited about. And because of the timing between, because mine was referred by the board and theirs was, they went through an initiative process where they got signatures, they had to turn in their ordinance and their proposals and all of that back in February before COVID. So we've actually been able to update, make sure our cost modeling made sense back, based on the updated revenue models that have COVID impact on that. We've also been working with them over, the past several months to really be able to update our proposals so that the agreed upon values and priorities of both organizations are represented in one measure. So, so I'm very hopeful that Preschool for All is the measure that will go forward as the only measure on the ballot, and that, we can really talk about the benefits to our community, in the fall.
Okay, one last question, and then I'm going to let you go to lunch. You've been very generous with your time. If I live in Clackamas County, which I do, but I work in Multnomah County, and I bring my little toddler with me, and I drop him off to preschool in Clackamas County because that's also where his daycare is in Multnomah County, and his daycare. Do I get free? I don't live in Multnomah County, but my child is in the daycare and the preschool in Multnomah County. Do I qualify? How are you going to work that? Is it from where you live or from where you are located for school?
So that's a good question. For right now, it's from where you live. So if and actually it's where the parent lives, because we know that sometimes there's like, divorce or separations or whatever. So it's really where the parent lives is how we're basing it on. But I think that's something that, again, as we have conversations and look at, what this looks like, we really scoped out Multnomah County to put some geographic boundaries on that.
Yeah. Well, Gresham has both. Gresham has Clackamas County and Multnomah County in our area. So I get those questions a lot, especially during that phase thing.
Yeah, no, and I think it makes sense. That was why, as we were looking at how to do this, we look at the Portland Children's Levy, and I know that there's a lot of folks who, in organizations who work outside of Portland, but are only able to use those funds in Portland. So it's something that we've come across a lot. If there was something that happened at the federal level, I think that solves a lot of problems. But for now, we're just doing this locally and incrementally so that we can start setting something up to grow.
Now, the biggest improvements in our United States have all started in the home and then in the community and then moving on. So thank you, Commissioner. This was a wonderful, wonderful presentation. Again, your passion comes out, and we'll be watching for the final language that's going to go to the ballot measure. So I do want to thank you, Commissioner. I also want to thank Mike Pullen and Cassie Davis for the previous presentation. All of it was great. This has been recorded. Some of the questions that have been in the chat box have talked about the recording has been recorded. You'll be able to see that or hear that on the chamber through the chamber website, but also with Metro East community media and their typical cable scenarios. So you can contact the chamber office, or we'll be putting it out in a newsletter of how to get those updates. Upcoming months, we've got 2 BLTs, or 2 Business and Leaders Luncheons, scheduled for September. On the 15th is a candidate forum. And then we're also going to have the pro and the con side of the Metro Transportation Tax on as a BLT. Watch for that date. It hasn't been confirmed yet. And finally, but not least, I want to thank our very wonderful and generous sponsors. Columbia Bank, thank you so much. Portland General Electric, the Bowling Company, Gresham Barlow School District, and Metro East Community Media. Thank you for your sponsorship. Thank you for making this possible today. And thank you, all of you, for participating in the Business and Leaders Luncheon today. Have a great week. Bye.